بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. This is the help video for the Nahmad and Haywood book on Arabic grammar called A New Arabic Grammar, Chapter 3, Paragraph 4. In this paragraph, Nahmad and Haywood introduce the harf particle called hal. Hal is a particle which can be added to the beginning of a nominal sentence, i.e. al-jumla al-ismiyya, to convert it from a positive sentence into a question. So if we look at this sentence here, it says Khalidun mudarrisun. Khalid is a teacher. Just a quick reminder, the reason we say Khalid is because the word Khalid is definite and mudarris is indefinite, so we know the is lives in between. How do we know that Khalid is definite when it doesn't have alif lam? Is because Khalid is a proper noun. To convert this into a question which has a yes or no answer, we just add the particle hal at the beginning of the sentence. And hal is a very nice particle because it doesn't affect any of the other words in the sentence. So we would just add hal at the beginning and it would become hal Khalidun mudarrisun. Is Khalid a teacher? And the answer is he is either a teacher, na'am, yes, or he is not a teacher, la. Look at this second example here. It says هل يدرس خالد. So in the first example we had a nominal sentence, and now we have a sentence that's after the hal that begins with a verb. يدرس. يدرس means to teach. So if we imagine that we didn't have the hal, this sentence would read يدرس خالد. Khalid teaches. If we want to ask the question, does Khalid teach? We would just add hal. Again, hal doesn't affect any of the words in the sentence, and we would read it as hal yudarrisu Khalidun. Does Khalid teach? And the answer again is na'am or la. Yes, he teaches, or no, he doesn't. What happens if we make the sentence a bit more complicated? Let's take a verbal sentence. So we start with yudarrisu Khalidun aw Zaydun. So yudarris we said was teaches, and this reads as Khalid teaches or Zayd teaches. So if we want to ask, does Khalid or Zayd teach? We would just add hal again at the beginning. Hal yudarrisu Khalidun aw Zaydun. Now it may appear from this sentence that the answer should be, if somebody asks you, does Khalid or Zayd teach? You could understand that to mean, does either one of them teach? And you could answer, yes, Khalid teaches, or yes, Zayd teaches. But when you use a hal, the only answer that is allowed is na'am or la. So that's why when we say hal yudarrisu Khalidun or Zaydun, you really have to think of this as one unit. So it's almost as if there's a bracket here, if you think back in algebra, and a bracket here. So the hal applies to the whole bracket. So what we're really asking is, does anybody in the bracket teach? So even if both are teaching, or one of the two is teaching, the answer would be positive and we would say naam. So if you're in a school and you had a teacher called Khalid, and somebody asks you, هل يدرس خالد أو زيد? You'd say naam, and that meant that yes, one of the two is teaching. If you went to school B and only Zayd was teaching, you would also answer naam. If you went to school C where both Khalid and Zayd were teaching, you would still say naam. It's only in school D where there's neither a Khalid nor a Zayd would you answer la. But you wouldn't answer this question by saying in school A and B Khalid yudarris or Zayd yudarris. You would just say naam or la. Now let's look at another equivalent particle to hal called a. This is a seat, and is just a hamza. It's usually written on top of the alif, and it always has a fatha, always. So again, like hal, it's a very benign particle. You put it at the beginning of a sentence and it doesn't affect any of the words. So Khalidun remains Khalidun and Mudarrisun remains Mudarrisun. So if we cover up the we have the sentence Khalidun Mudarrisun. Khalid is a teacher. Now we want to switch this into a question. We just put the at the beginning, and you don't leave a space. Even that looks like a space, but that's just my bad handwriting. A Khalidun Mudarrisun. Is Khalid a teacher? And again the answer is Naam or La. And if you compare this example with the first example, they're virtually identical. Okay, here Hal Khalidun Mudarrisun, and this is A Khalidun Mudarrisun. The only difference is we replaced Hal by A. Now, what about if you have two options? Let's go back to the sentence that we had at the beginning. أيدرس خالد أم زيد. Now this sentence looks very much like this sentence here. هل يدرس خالد أو زيد. The word أو, is a particle which means or. So does teaching Khalid. Does Khalid teach or Zaid teach? And we said here the only possible answers are Nam or La. Another word for أو is and this comes and occurs with an So if you have an question and you want to ask, does he teach teacher A, Khalid, or teacher B, Zaid, and you want the person to answer, you want them to choose one of these two options, then you have to use a. So okay, this is the style in which it's said in Arabic. أيدرس خالد أم زيد. Does Khalid teach or does Zaid teach? And the answer will be يدرس خالد أو يدرس زيد. Obviously, if neither of them teach, then you would have to make that clear. So when we want to give an option to somebody and we want them to choose from one of the two answers that we're giving in the question, we use a and What would happen if we used hal instead of a with an Well, it would become like this. Hal جاء زيد أم سعيد. So here I replace the a with hal. I replace the verb يدرس to teach with جاء, means he came. So did he came Zaid or Sa'id is how you would literally look at the different words. But this doesn't actually quite mean that. Here the word doesn't mean or anymore. When it's in the context of hal, it actually means something called bal. And bal means, in a sense, instead. So hal ja'a Zaydun, so the person speaking and he asks a question, did Zayd come? And then he says he wants to correct himself. He says, bal Sa'idun. What I really meant was Sa'id. Hal ja'a Zaydun bal Sa'idun. Did Zayd, no, I mean Sa'id come. So you see the word, you can't use hal with هل جاء زيد أم جاء سعيد. This is the same, this is the equivalent of the sentence above. It's just to show that when we use we are actually repeating the verb automatically. But can you use hal with two options? Or if you want to use or, how can you use it? Well, it does occur in the Quran, and that's why I've just mentioned it here. And if we use the and we want to repeat a question and not use to mean that's not what I meant, i.e. bal, then you have to repeat the hal again. So if you want to say did this or that, did this happen or did that happen, using hal, you can use but you have to repeat the hal. So let's give an example here. This is in the Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هل يستوي الأعمى والبصير أم هل تستوي الظلمات والنور. So it's part of an ayah where the question is being asked. يستوي means to equal. هل يستوي, does this equal? What does what equal? Al-a'ma, blindness, wal-basir, sightedness. Is being blind the same as being sighted? That's the first question. Or, now we want to repeat a question, we have to repeat the hal, otherwise it will be mistaken for the example above. Okay, so you have to say am hal tastawi al-dhulumatu wan-nur. The second question, tastawi, because al-dhulumat is female, hence this verb is now female. Does darkness equal light? So this is a more advanced understanding of how to use hal with am. It's not covered in the Nahmad and Hayward book at this point. I think they do cover it slightly somewhere later, but I've mentioned it here for probably completeness sake, and inshallah it'll be of some benefit. If you don't memorize it, doesn't matter. What you need to know is that this rule exists somewhere, and you can always check it up whenever you're not certain. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.